summer session together. For today's lesson, this is lesson number 6, we are going to be doing a step-by-step jellyfish painting together. This one's a little bit more involved than some of the other projects we've done together, so it might take a little bit more time. You are definitely going to need a hairdryer for this one as we move through the different steps. So bear with me. I know this looks incredibly difficult, but you will be able to do this as we work together. So let's get started, and let me first kind of show you some resources that I have provided myself that you could get your hands on easily. I am inspired by this, he was actually a scientist, biologist, Ernst Haeckel, and this is just a book that I found, and I've been inspired by this myself because when you're an artist, you can be inspired by lots of different things. It doesn't have to always be another artist or by going to a museum. Sometimes you can be inspired by just the little things like nature. Which nature is not a little thing, but there's lots of different little things in nature. So this guy actually did some printmaking. He did some printmaking plates, and this book gives lots of different biology and microbiology of different things. But you can see from the cover is actually a jellyfish. So this was a book that I actually had myself, but you can look up any kind of book that you have at your library and rent them to have a visual resource for yourself. These are just images that I found online. So if you have something that you can look off of, sometimes that's helpful. I know when I work with students in the school system, a lot of times they'll pull up images on their phones that helps them as a visual reference. So this is just a basic, almost like a coloring page, a very basic graphic of a jellyfish. Doesn't have to be anything. I also provided myself different little plants and different things that can grow in the bottom of the ocean, sponges and starfish and sea fish and things like that. So if you want additional things in your painting, you're more than welcome to add those things. So think about yours, how you want it to be. Again, like everything else we've done together, I want you to make it your own. I want you to make it personal. Let's start by giving you an idea of the materials that we'll be using for today. So for our supply list for lesson number 6, I put down a white canvas board. This is a canvas board. You can get these at craft stores. This is what it kind of looks like in the back. You can even get these sometimes at like Dollar General or Michael's if you have a Michael's by you. Even Walmart will sell them. And you can get them in different sizes. Now mine is quite a bit, it's pretty large, and the reason I did that was for the sake of this lesson so that you could see what I'm doing very clearly, but yours does not have to be this big. You could work very small if you choose to, but you can get these in different sizes, or if you don't have the money or the resources to be able to go this route with a canvas board, you can even take a big piece of cardboard. So if you have, like, let's say your parents got an Amazon box or something in the mail, if you cut out a big square side of one of those boxes, you can use that as a canvas. You would just paint it all white first as a base, just like these are, and then you can start from there. So you don't even have to have special equipment. You can use basic things to paint. You are going to need various paint colors. For this, you're going to need rather these craft paints that you can get at the store or acrylic paints. Now I'm using a mix because I didn't happen to have a purple. I thought it'd be easier for the sake not to mix my purple, although it's very easy to mix purple. But I've got different various colors. For the background, I'm using a white, a light blue, a dark blue, and a black. Now, if you're going to do an underwater scene, which most of you probably are, and definitely if you're going to be mimicking what I'm doing today, you're going to need those 4 different colors for your background. And if you're doing any kind of underwater scene, you're going to need something similar to that. So that's really the only colors that you would have to have. For the other colors of the jellyfish and kind of mixing colors and doing different things, and these aren't necessarily natural colors of the wild, but these are colors that I'm using. I've got a pink, a green, a yellow, an orange, the purple I had in the tube, and then another tone of blue. But any of these colors here could really be switched out for any color that you choose to do. I definitely suggest though that you've definitely got a white in there because that's what we will be using for the base of our jellyfish. So your paints can they don't have to be these. You are going to need a variety of brushes. I've got different kinds of brushes here. You don't have to have these exact ones, and I'll show you different techniques that you can use, but I have a variety of brushes here. One of them that I'm going to demonstrate is actually called a fan brush, and you can probably understand why it's called a fan brush, right? Because it looks like a little fan. You don't have to have a fan brush, but I do demonstrate using a fan brush, but there are other techniques that you can use if you don't have one. So it is helpful if you have kind of a larger brush. That's how I did my background. But again, you don't have to have one. It would just take a little bit longer if you didn't have the larger brush. Okay, you'll also need a cup of water. Just got a measuring cup here. Any kind of plastic cup will work. I've got my pictures of jellyfish, and then a hairdryer, which I'm definitely going to be using for this, depending on what you're doing at home. Again, you don't have to do that, but for the sake of this demo, because there's different layers, I'm going to be using a hairdryer. Okay, so let's get started. Oh, and one thing that I did not put on this is you're going to need something to put your paint on. So I'm just using styrofoam plates because I can throw them away afterwards, but if you've got a palette or a board or a piece of cardboard, you can put it on that as well. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is the background. So I'm going to squirt my paint on here, and I'm going to start with the 4 colors that we talked about, from light to dark. And if you think of light to dark is values. If you've heard your art teacher talk about values in your class before, value is the lightness and the darkness of a color. And we are going to use different kinds of values in this, and we are also going to be doing some blending to make things look a little bit more realistic. Okay, I'm going to start with my 4 different colors here. Kind of using up the paint that I had here, so hopefully I've got plenty to work with. Okay, so we'll start with that and maybe just a little bit more of this, because I've got my canvas board is a little bit bigger. So I'm going to work from my part over here. I've also got a pretty good size wad of paper towels. I used, when I did this from home, when I did my example from home, I used a towel, just a kind of like a spare towel that I had. But what I'm going to do first, since mine is already primed meaning it's got that white background on it, if you have a piece of cardboard or if you're working from something like a piece of wood, you want to make sure that before you get started that you have a basic white background. That's what you want to start with. So I'm just going to wet my brush here a little bit, and I'm going to actually start with my white, and I'm going to start from the top. So basically we're going to start from the top and work our way down. And you kind of, somebody's probably wondering out there, even though, you know, we're not talking in person, why would you paint white on white? Well, is it really going to show up? Not so much. But the reason I'm doing that is because I'm starting to work my colors together so that when I add the next shade, I can actually blend colors together. So it's important that I actually have some wet paint on there, okay? You don't want your paint to be so wet that it's going to be dripping down the canvas. But if you can see what I'm doing here, I'm actually doing kind of like a half sun semicircle, right? I'm going across, and you can see as I'm mimicking this, that's what's kind of making that top of the water, that peak of the water. So now I'm going to move on to my next color. And I'm not even going to actually clean up my brush yet. I'm just going to actually add some paint to this. And again, I'm going to try to keep that semicircle. And if your paint is real kind of thick, you just add a little bit of water to it. Mine have been sitting for a little bit, so sometimes when they sit, they kind of clump together a little bit, so you want to make sure that you have nice, smooth paint. So I'm going to go in now And I've kind of left a gap between my top and my bottom here. And I'm creating a big width here. If you're thinking about this in 4 colors, you almost want to think about that in terms of 4 parts to your canvas. Okay, so now I'm going to start kind of going in here and getting a little bit closer to my white. And as I hit that white, you can see how it's starting to blend with that light blue. And it's okay if it's a little bit blotchy. You kind of see the blotches through here. You're more than welcome to add more paint if you like, but in some ways I kind of like that because it reminds me of like the sunlight kind of coming through the water. But I'm just very lightly kind of feathering my brush to bring in that white into that blue so that it looks a little bit more natural. If you have just white, just blue, and you just keep going from the next color to the next, it's going to look like just huge bands of color. But if you blend it and you kind of feather it in, then you're going to start actually getting some of that more natural. So you can even add some more white in so that actually you're getting those values I was talking about earlier, just from the side. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to rinse my brush out a little bit, and I'm going to move on to that next darker color. So my next darker color, I'm looking at kind of like a navy blue or a dark blue. And that's going to be my next band of color. Oh, I got a little too much water in there, that's okay. In a little bit, we won't even see that. And still I'm kind of curving it back and forth this way, right? Okay, now I'm going to go in up top here. I'm going to pull some of that blue color. Try to pull some of that blue so we get more of a gradation from that. We're kind of feathering it again. Just take some time. Take some time to just kind of play with it a little bit and to pull some of those colors from the side so that you get like a really pretty gradation as you go down. But the goal is that you start from light and as you get further down, it goes dark, but you're getting a really dark color. Last, we're going to get some black in here. And that's why I said that little bit of water drip that we got from here, you won't even see that because the black is going to cover that up. Keep using the side here as you paint kind of to a semicircle. Again, because you're almost like looking down. Okay, so let's add black next. Black is going to be our next color. So I'm going to clean out my brush here so I can get some darker colors for the bottom. on to black, my black paint, okay? And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start from the bottom here to make sure that the bottom is a complete stark black. I have to squirt some more black on my plate here. It goes quicker than you think. Need some more black paint. This one might be out. I might have to grab them. Had a few little spares over here just in case. There we go. It's always a good idea to start with a smaller amount of paint and then to add, because otherwise you could waste a lot of paint by putting a huge puddle on there. So start with a small amount and add it to kind of reduce your chances of wasting paint. So it kind of tends to, you might have to squirt it on there a few times to get what you need, but that's okay. Better than wasting a bunch of paint because you can't put it back in the bottle very easily. Okay, so now we're starting with black again here at the bottom. And this is where now I'm going to start pulling some of that blue. And this is why it's important that you do this while it's still wet, because all those, and that's why I started with that white wet paint up top. Because even though you can't see it, it's still wet paint that you can blend. And the paint has to be wet in order for you to blend it. So now we're going to start pulling some of that wet paint from up top to blend new values of a darker blue up here. And you can see how if you didn't have a large brush for this, it could take a lot longer. So you don't have to have a big brush, but it's definitely helpful if you could get access to a big brush, just because you have more with the size of your brush to actually blend. I'm trying to get rid of some of these paint strokes in here. Okay. So now we kind of look like we're underwater a little bit. Now we've got some, because we know as we go deeper into the ocean, it gets dark. It gets really dark, doesn't it? Some of those little creatures that can live in the bottom of the ocean with no light at all. Okay. So this is step one. This is the bottom of our ocean. I'm going to clean out my brush. And this is where I'm actually going to go in now. And because this is going to be the base for the jellyfish, it's important that I actually dry this off, because if I don't, when I start painting the jellyfish, the colors from the jellyfish can actually, the new wet paint over top of this wet paint could smear. And you don't want that to happen. You want like a nice base. So I'm cleaning out my brush here, getting rid of all of that black. I've got a little bit of white here that I just need to blend on the sides. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my hair dryer and I'm actually going to give this a dry coat. I'm going to blow this out. So this is going to take a minute or two, but we'll do this together. Let's get this, let's see here. There we go. Technical difficulties. Here we go. way, so you can see how we have a gradation now from light all the way to dark. Whatever colors that you choose to go, if you don't go with blue, you can do a gradation of any color because there can be a value of any color that you choose, but because we're doing underwater, that's what we chose. So next step is to what? Well, we need a jellyfish, don't we? That's probably the next part. So let's start with, we are going to start with, well, I've got a little bit of white on here, so I'm gonna kind of borrow that white. And I'm gonna add, some other colors here to get started. Squirty squirt, okay. Then we've got green. And we've got some really pretty blue. Yellow. Orange, and I may or may not use all these colors, you know. It's kind of like my other example. Sometimes I'll start doing what I did the first time around and then I change my mind and I go a different direction and choose different colors the next time. So no piece may be exactly the same. And so what we're going to start with now is I'm actually going to go ahead and use like a round, thicker brush for this right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and map out my jellyfish. And as you all know, this is dry now. And just to kind of give you an idea based on the size of my canvas, the jellyfish, you don't want it to be too big, but you don't want it to be too small unless you're going to do multiple jellyfish or different organisms and things in there. So for mine, I'm going to do the head of the jellyfish about the same size as the palm of my hand. So I'm going to kind of start it here, and I'm going to kind of map it about that size. Okay. So yours may be a little bit smaller or bigger depending on the size of your canvas. And if you think of a jellyfish, it's kind of like, started off kind of like a semicircle, but it's kind of like a bell. And it's got these little swirls in here. So I'm kind of like sketching with my white paint is what I'm doing right now. Okay. And I'm going to fill that in right now. Real lightly, I'm just going to kind of, this is my under sketch here, just to kind of get a basic idea. Probably need some more water here. I'm getting dirty water. So that's my first just sketch, I guess is what I'd say, of my jellyfish. Okay? So here's the fun part now. We're going to add all the little tentacles. And here's the good part of jellyfish. Jellyfish, no two are the same. They do all kind of have, overall they have the same kind of bell form, but they're all really different and weird, and so they're just a strange kind of creature. So, you know, they don't all have to be exactly the same. Yours may be shaped a little bit wider. They come in all different sizes. So you may have one that's wider and, or, you know, less, maybe it's not as bulky, it might be a little bit skinnier. Or maybe you have one of those giant squids, so it's whatever you want to do, it's fine. It doesn't have to look exactly like mine, and I hope it looks more like yours anyway, because then it's your artwork and not my artwork. Okay, so now we're going to come in with the fun part. I am going to grab some new water real quick. Give me just a second, I'm going to grab some new water. I'm in my classroom, so I have the convenience of a sink here with me. But I'm just grabbing some fresh water, and I probably should have done that to begin with, but it makes a big difference because when you start getting like that first amount of water, all that dark pigment in that water that you've rinsed out of your brush can get your other colors really mucky. So you want to avoid that. You can get clean water. So, okay, so now the next part is I'm going to switch over here to my, I'm going to put a squirt of white paint here in the middle, because I use white for a lot. And I'm going to switch over to some of these brushes now. So the first thing I'm going to do, this is where I'm going to demo my fan brush, is I'm going to be using like these two brushes, this one and this one. But if you have, you know, a brush this size, that would work too. If you don't have the fan brush, it's no big deal. So I'm going to start with the fan brush because I'm going to demo something really cool that you can do that I learned online. I can't take credit for this because this was not my idea. But I wet my fan brush just a little bit. You don't want it dripping wet. And then to make all these little pieces in here, these tentacles that kind of twist underneath. So on this paper, you would see them as these right here. A really cool way to do that is to take your fan brush, and I'm going to do, I'll do pink with some white. So I'm going to kind of mix a little bit of white, kind of like a pastel pink. So I'm going to put some color on my brush. Got some color on my brush. And I am going to start from the beginning here, up right here. And if you just kind of twist your brush as you go. Isn't that cool? That's a really cool technique. I'm going to do another one. Add a little bit more pink. And these, you know, I don't think they come out pink in nature. I don't think they're actually pink. So I think that you could do any color that you wanted for these. So when I talk about pink, you don't have to use pink. You can use whatever colors that you have at home. Okay, I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to do it in a different color. This time I think I'm going to go with orange, because I didn't use orange last time, so I'm going to play around with a little bit of orange. And it kind of pops when you add a little bit of white to it, so giving it kind of like a pastel white base to it if you pull some of that white. So here's my orange. I'm going to start another one here. I'm just kind of twisting my brush, and then at the end I'm just kind of tapering it off. I'm going to do one on this side that kind of overlaps. And the best part is, you know what, you really can't go wrong because these creatures are so, everyone is so different. They don't all have the same number of tentacles and stingers and all those sorts of things that they have. So, okay, now I'm going to go in with my white brush, and I'm going to do one in white. So you can add as many of these as you want, or as least amount that maybe you don't even want these kind, that's okay. And just as you go to the end, just kind of taper them off. Sometimes I twist into other ones. So here's a good variety of them. Now I'm going to go in, well that's starting to dry, I'm going to go in up here and start playing around with the bell or the top, the head of the jellyfish. Now I'm going in with kind of a round brush. Doesn't have to be a round brush. I've got a flat brush in here too, but I'm going to use this one because this, since it was just kind of an undercoat, I'm going to make sure that it's dry by using my hair dryer again and just make sure this is blown dry, okay? top part, and I am going to use purple purple again like I did on this one. And I'm going to start by mixing a little bit of my purple with some water. And I'm going to come in and, again, this was blow dried, so this should be dry now because you don't want to put your hand over it and then come to find out it's wet. I'm kind of just outlining the same thing that I had before, but now in purple. And this is where you can kind of clean up, because if these didn't quite hit up top, you can always outline and go a little bit further out than what you had before. I'm just kind of following the curve of these right now. You can use any color you want. I'm using purple, but you can use whatever color you choose to use. It's fine. So I'm just kind of pulling some of this color up right now. And I'm going to go back in with some other colors here in just a little bit, but I'm just kind of playing around with this right now. I'm going to try to keep the top light, because as it's going up towards the surface, it's probably hitting some of that sun, some of that light that's hitting there, so I'm not going to go too far up with this, and I'm going to keep some of that light color to the top. Oh, and I'm dripping a little bit here. If you got water that's dripping, that probably means that you just have a little too much water in your brush. No big deal. You can block that out. We can go over that. No problem. That's the best part of paint. Okay, so now I'm going to, while that is setting for a minute before we add more color to that, I'm going to add these little extra tentacles. And the reason why I demoed the fan brush first is because you want these kind of tentacles, ones that are twisty and a little bit more bulky, you want those down first. Because trying to put these little ones out, which are to the outer part of the jellyfish, if you put those in first and then these on second, it's backwards, right? You want to show dimension by actually adding the thin ones to the outside and the bulkier ones to the inside, just like the picture. It'd be hard to add these afterwards. So we're going to move on now to these other stringy ones. And so for that, I am using, I don't need that fan brush right now. I'm going to use just this little tiny brush. And you can use that one, or you can use, it doesn't have to be a round brush, it can be a flat brush too. So I'm going to get that wet, and I'm going to add, how about green with some white? Again, I'm adding white so that you can kind of see some bulk to it. But what you do want to think about is you want it to be thicker. We're going to start from the top. You don't want to go past, but you want to kind of go to the tip here where the jellyfish begins, right? But you want it to be thicker, and then as it goes further down, you want it to get thinner, okay? Just like it would in a real jellyfish. So I'm going to start here from the top. I'm going to kind of go thick. And then as I move through, and if I didn't have enough paint, I can always go back in and just kind of overlap what I did. Follow that line. Okay, I'm going to do another one in green. And of course, this brush is not going to pick up as much paint, and that's why sometimes you have to go over it, because, you know, it's a smaller brush. Let's do another one. Start it maybe from here. We'll go thick. Overlap maybe some of this color. I'm going to go in here. I'm grabbing up a little bit of that orange paint that's still on there. That might be a little bit wet. Grab that same color. Go in here. Real light. Real light. You're just kind of tapering it off. Do another one. Do one from here. be long. Some of them can be short. Some can twist around, right? There's no rhyme or reason really, so you can do whatever you want. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to do a few here in blue. I think the blue looks really pretty, so I'm going to do a few blue, and those will be my pop of blue color here. Same thing, I'm starting up here, working my way down. Okay. I think the last touch for that is to actually add some that are just white. Just white ones. And they kind of pop too. If you have them go off the page, it almost looks like the jellyfish is coming up from the bottom of the ocean floor. So you can really put as much time in this as you want. You can add tons of them. You can really bulk it up underneath. This is all about your style, your color choice, what you choose to do. Okay, so I'm going to blow dry that a minute so that we can go back to working up here without having to smear it with our arm. So let's take a little air to that. Top of the jellyfish now, so we are done with the bottom part. On yours, if you want to come back and play with that, that is more than your choice to do that, to go back in and to add some more. But I am going up to the top now, and I'm actually going to play with yellow. So I have some yellow in this one. I played with lots of different colors, and I did some blending. And the longer you play with this, the more that you can get from it. Just depends on how much time you want to put into it, but I'm going to move on to a pop of yellow here, and I'm going to go with purple and yellow this time. So I'm just taking yellow. You can take any color you want, and I'm just kind of defining those different little parts of the bell of the jellyfish. And this is not how it would be in nature, but that's okay, because it's a pop of color and it's kind of fun. Okay, and then I am going to kind of take some of these, I'm going to go back in here with some purple. And this is where you can really play and spend some time, because there is no stopping point to this. The longer that you want to work on this, you can. But if you start adding a lot of colors, you will want to blow dry between them because your colors are going to start to blend. Okay. Then I'm going to take my brush and just kind of blend some of this out here. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to take blue, a real pretty blue, and I'm going to do this with my thin brush. And I'm actually just going to add some dots. Because jellyfish have those weird dots and dashes. And if you don't know how to do this, you can even use like the bottom of the brush. You could use a Q-tip. You could use the top of a pencil and stamp with it. Even have some of those dots on the top of their head. They have these weird dashes. Dots and dashes. They also have, if you choose to add one, they actually have kind of like the bell on top. So you see these dots that I'm talking about with the dashes. If you didn't want to do the dots, you can always add the bell to the top. And right here, they just have the three kind of marks to it. So there's all sorts of options that you can do. This is our jellyfish fun. And however you want to add or take away from this, you can add more dots and more dashes as if it's going through the water. But any colors you choose that you want to do, any shape that you want. But this is our step-by-step jellyfish, and this is our last session together. So I just want to thank you for letting me be a part of your summer and for allowing me to do the art sessions with you. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact me through the Jessamine County Library. But it's been an honor, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer. Thanks.